In Russia, President Vladimir Putin has won a bid to extend his two-decade rule. In a national referendum, the Kremlin secured a change to term limit rules. It would allow Putin to potentially stay in power until 2036. The Central Election Commission said 78% of Russians voted for the proposal, with 99.9% of precincts counted. Turnout was 65%. Authorities released the first vote counts even before polls closed. Joining us now is Elisabeth Braw, RUSI Senior Research Fellow. Elisabeth, great to speak to you then. So there is the potential for Putin to be in charge. He's been in charge for 2 decades, for him to be in charge until 2036, so another 15 years or so. Do you expect him to stand? That remains a question, I guess.
Well, it was interesting. I heard on Swedish national radio this morning, the Russian ambassador to Sweden was interviewed, and he said, well, it doesn't mean anything at all that he has the chance of standing twice again. There's no guarantee that he will. And so he was trying to downplay this news. But the reality is that this is a big change. He can stand for re-election again and then again after that. And it just shows how Putin keeps taking the initiative and keeps surprising us, even though this was not really a surprise that he wanted to stay on longer. But he keeps pulling new tricks out of the hat, and this is one of them. I think that the trick that he did the strategy that he pursued in this referendum was to couple this potential extension of his time in power with various other changes that people really wanted. So you can't really, in the referendum, you can't turn down one part of the referendum and not the other. So here we are, and he can stay in power until his 80s now, if he likes.
You know, there are a lot of analysts who say he wasn't strikingly smart during his time in the KGB, but you cannot debate how incredibly successful he has been in terms of grabbing and holding power here. Why do you think that is?
He is a very innovative man, we have to say, even though, of course, we in the West don't particularly like him, or we detest him, many of us. But the reality is he has kept taking the initiative. He has kept surprising us when he seized Crimea and when Russia engaged or began this military action against Ukraine. That came as a surprise to us. Then we thought, oh, he will do the same thing against parts of the Baltic states. He will grab territory there. Instead, he did something completely different, which is to engage in Syria. So he keeps taking the initiative, and we keep being on the back foot, because the only thing that he is limited by is the power of his imagination, which is clearly using to great effect now.
And with that in mind, what role should we expect Russia to play in the forthcoming US elections, Elisabeth?
Well, so there has been a lot of concern that they'll repeat what they did in 2016, which is trying to influence the outcome by meddling with the process. I think that's sort of old news now. The Russians never or rarely repeat the same trick twice. And so, and of course, we have to remember that now the social media platforms are better prepared for this sort of interference. So the Russians may try something completely different. For example, I think one area that's interesting to watch is social discontent over all kinds of areas. In Europe, we have seen in recent weeks a really disturbing trend, which is that people are setting fire to 5G antennas because they think it has something to do with coronavirus. And those sort of conspiracy theories can very productively and effectively be spread by operations like the Russian Internet Research Agency that interfered with the 2016 election in Russia. So it doesn't have to do with the elections themselves, just spreading discontent, spreading disbelief in the authorities, spreading unhappiness with the structure of our countries, with liberal democracy. And there is already unhappiness. So building on that, and that's something that I think we should really watch. And there is, especially in America, as we all know, there is a lot of unhappiness with the way the country is run, with the way the country is set up.
What do you think Donald Trump has learned from Vladimir Putin?
he has learned that he would quite like to stay in power for a long time. He has flirted with that idea publicly a number of times, and when talking about Putin or Kim Jong-un, he sort of says that, well, you know, I might like to stay on in power for more than 2 terms. And of course, we all think it's a joke, but when Putin came to power in 1999, we would probably have thought it was a joke if he said that, yeah, I might try to stay on for more than my legal limit in office. And it's clear that Trump likes Putin. That's not been a secret. But it was interesting to hear in your previous segment with John Bolton, where he pointed out that the Republican Party is really all about Trump now. And that's exactly what we have in Russia. Who else? What else does his party stand for? It's about him. And that's something that whatever else Trump has done, and I think most of us would claim he has a lot of failings, but he has managed to transform the party into the Republican Party into the party of Donald Trump.